Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, the Gen Z basketball, coaching, and sports business show. On this podcast, you'll learn from professional players, coaches, and executives from all over the world and see the court in a brand new way. And now, joining you courtside, your Gen Z host, John Hartofilis.
Coach Taylor, how are you?
Hey, man. I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. Really excited to have you on. I mean, you're definitely someone that I've been watching on YouTube or on all these other platforms for years now. And to actually get a chance to talk to it is really cool for me. And really can't wait to just jump into all the stuff you're doing now, the stuff you've been doing, all the knowledge you've been sharing about the game, and really share it for our listeners. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, very cool. A lot has changed for sure. A lot has changed. So I'm excited as well.
Awesome. So to get us started, to give listeners a little bit of background on you, can you kind of talk to us about where that passion from the game maybe came from, whether it was from when you first started, maybe as you got older and started coaching? Where did you really fall in love with the game?
That's a really good question. I don't think I've ever actually talked about that before, but my grandfather played professionally, and this was like way, way, way back when professional basketball was maybe not what it is today. So it didn't mean a whole lot back then, but he kind of indoctrinated me into basketball when I was, I would say 9 or 10. And then from that point, I have like an obsessive personality. So as soon as I started playing, I was like, okay, I'm going to be the best. I'm going to train all day, every day. I was researching whatever I could. There wasn't a lot of information available online back then, but I would like read biographies and books and like look at everything that I possibly could to maximize my own training. And this was like back 5th, 6th grade that I was really getting obsessed about it. And that's basically where I suppose I fell in love with it. Although coaching didn't come until much, much later. My plan was always, I wanted to play in college and then go overseas and play professionally. I always kind of knew I wasn't going to make it to the NBA. I was like, okay, I'm like a 6-foot white guy from Canada. It's been done, but like odds are, Europe would be pretty cool. I can travel and European girls and whatever. And so that was always my plan. Yeah, I don't know if you want how deep into the backstory you want me to get. How far would you like me to go?
Oh, so yeah, so this could be all off air, but just in general, it was kind of like, I mean, like what you said at the beginning about like how you never get asked that before, like that's kind of the whole point is like, definitely want to go in depth on you. So if anyone ever is like, oh, I'm a huge fan of Coach Taylor, like I want to see what he's about. This is kind of where that would be. So, I mean, definitely go as far, as deep as you want to go into it. There's really no limit to it. If you want to go a little bit deeper, maybe talk about when you were a senior in high, all that stuff. I mean, feel free, please.
Yeah, so the plan was always to play overseas in Europe. Trained really hard in high school. I was a good player, never like a really, really great player, but I did get a scholarship to play at a university here. And I had torn the cartilage in my hip capsule I think in my senior year of high school. Had surgery, came back for a 5th year, which they allow here in Ontario and Canada. Played really well, but after I got that surgery, I remember it never really occurred to me until that moment that I got hurt and doctors were saying, maybe you don't want to play anymore. And it never even occurred to me that like not playing for a living was an option. I was always like, it never entered my mind. And so I remember like driving home from the hospital with my dad and saying to him like, oh wait, what if I didn't play basketball anymore? Like what would life even look like? And I was like, oh, well, I'm really into this training stuff. And actually at the time, the training aspect of it became more of a passion for me than the playing itself. And I actually looked forward to the off season even more than the in-season or the actual season with my team. And so I kind of theorized in my mind, like, okay, if I could just write training programs for a living and train basketball players for a living and do that full time, that would be the best job ever. Like I don't need to necessarily play anymore. I just want to do this training stuff. And that actually happened. I have no idea how I got so lucky to do that, but basically I re-injured my hip in training camp in college. I was told, again, you got like a long rehab process. I didn't want to go through that again. I didn't want to go through the surgery again. I was thinking, okay, I'm just so burnt out on basketball, but I do want to train people. And I still remember I was in my dorm room one evening, and I don't know exactly how I came across this, but there was something on like digital marketing and online marketing that I stumbled upon. I swear it must have been like 6 a.m. by the time I lifted my head up and like the sun was coming up, and I had gone down this really deep rabbit hole into how to like publish courses and stuff online. And this is back, I think 2008, 2008, yeah, late 2008. So this was not done back then, and it was very uncommon. I spoke about it with my friends. They had no idea like YouTube was even relatively new. Yeah, so anyhow, long story short, I end up publishing a shooting program online. It does really well. Publish a few more courses. They do really well. Elite Guard Training is formed. We bring coaches on. 10 years later, here we are.
I can't wait to jump into everything in terms of where we are now, EGT, DeepGame, all this cool stuff you've been involved in. And when you said at the beginning how you normally don't get to talk about all those things, that those things are so important to your both your past and your present, because it's such an important part of your story. So thank you so much for sharing that, because it's stuff that I didn't even know even after watching your content for all these years. So you brought up EGT. I'm curious as to when. So you put up a bunch of programs, they were successful. When did that transition happen into making a company out of it, or into making this network with all these other great coaches, so, many of whom have been past guests on this show? What did that all look like in terms of you really seeing this, obviously seizing the opportunity once you identified it and really taking advantage of it?
Yeah, as far as EGT goes, it was always a company from the beginning. Like I approached it as a business from the beginning. It wasn't a hobby. It was full time. Like my mother actually is a business professor at the school that I ended up getting a basketball scholarship to. And so I from that night forwards, I basically stopped going to class, stopped doing anything that wasn't like building this online course, and told my parents later on that that was going on. But it was like from the get-go, I just completely, I dropped out of school. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I have no idea how I like was so, looking back, it seems a little bit irresponsible and reckless, but like at the time, it just seemed like the simplest thing in the world. Of course, this is what I'm going to do. And so it was from the beginning. It did feel like a business. It felt like what I was meant to do. And so as far as that goes, I think the first program came out in late 2009, I believe. I might be fuzzy on these dates, don't quote me on that, but sometime around there. And until 2015, I was the only coach. So we had no programs from other coaches. Later on, we brought in Drew Hanlon, Allan Stein, Damon Altizer, Tim Martin, various coaches of that nature. But up until that point, like I was on camera doing all the teaching, doing all the filming, and it did really well. It was a simple business because it was just me, afforded me like the ability to travel and take a lot of time off. And it was really simple and lean and fun. And it got very big and complicated very quickly when we brought on other coaches. And I think it was late 2015, if I'm not mistaken, that Allan Stein reached out to us. And he had gotten connected with me through a mutual friend, Mano Watsa, who runs PGC basketball, the camp circuit. And so Allan and I meet in this like underground part of the Washington, D.C. train station randomly, because I had been traveling through like New York City, and that's the closest place that we could meet. So we meet, we talk for a few hours, hit it off. It didn't take long. I think it must have been like a couple months before we were filming our first training program together, released it. Drew kind of got linked in through Allan, and then next thing you know, we've got like this full catalog of various training programs from various coaches. We have a camp, we've got like hundreds of videos online. Very briefly, yeah, it just became like a big substantial business. And this year I essentially decided to transition out of it, and so that's where we get into DeepGame. And I'll pause there for you, just so if you have any questions we can cover those. But yeah, that's essentially the story up until this year.
Of course, yeah, I'm definitely gonna jump right into all the DK. This is all off air, but I'll definitely jump into the DK stuff. But that was really cool. Number one, I'll make the joke when we go back on air. But I was gonna make the joke about how I'm the same with this show and my parents. So I'm gonna say, like, Mom, if you're listening to this,
Yeah.
sorry. But it's really cool because I'll actually just pause it just because. So I find it so interesting when you talk about just what kind of made EGT unique with having this huge catalog and having all these different coaches, and obviously yourself in the beginning really having that edge on the mental side of things, and now you've transitioned into the DeepGame. I'm curious as to maybe what that really looks like, and kind of what kind of made you so interested in this mental side of the game even from the start.
To be honest with you, I wasn't interested in the mental side of the game of basketball so much as I was interested in the mental, emotional, psychological, spiritual aspect of life as a human being. And that's something that I became interested in through traveling in the early days of EGT from 2013 until 2017-ish, early 2017. I basically traveled full time. I didn't have a home. I was just traveling around the world and learning a lot about various basically meditative traditions through all different types of the world. I lived for 3 months in Hawaii and trained with this old 70-year-old Taoist master who used to do cage fighting in Japan and like really, really advanced Qigong stuff and martial arts stuff, and have done meditation retreats where we just sit in meditation for a week at a time, doing nothing but meditating the entire time. And so I was learning really, really advanced ways of working with the mind that are not relatable at all to basketball. Like they would just fly way over the heads of most players and not be useful in that way because they're just simply too advanced, you know? And so my process, like that's really where my heart was. And even while I was running the business of elite guard training, I would teach some of this stuff in the best way that I could. As advanced as it was, I tried to boil it down to like the simplified essentials for players, and I'd teach it to a few players. We had a program called EGTX where I taught some of it, but it wasn't until I think 2020, after I'd suppose I'd been doing it very extensively for 7 years, like practicing sometimes hours per day on my own, doing retreats, traveling all over the world, learning from teachers, that basically realized, and this is like the essence of DeepGame, is that as much as we have charted out a map of what I call the surface game, the game of skills and athleticism and the rules of the game and all the stuff that everybody sees going on the floor, nobody's ever charted out the map of what I call the deep game, or like the inner landscape of basketball, what's really happening in the mind. And coaches talk about things like Mamba mentality or confidence or mental toughness or leadership. And these are things that they sound nice, you know, they sound like good ideas, but they don't actually mean anything. You know, like if you told a kid like just be confident in yourself, it's like you might as well tell them like just be taller. It's like how do you do that? And so my obsession basically during the early stages of quarantine in 2020, I was sitting in my house thinking like, oh wait, there are rules of that game too. There are rules to that game, just like there are rules like you go out of bounds, you turn the ball over, you score more points than the other team, you win, like simple stuff like that. There are rules to the inner aspect of basketball, the deep game, that are just as fundamental as like Newton's law of motion, right? Or gravity. They're very, very simple and predictable, and they're not opinions or perceptions. They're actually laws. They're fundamental. And so what I did is I mapped out 8 laws of the deep game as I see them, and they've become the basis for this new business and program and course that I run called Deep Game. And I've since retired EGT and closed up like all of those programs and transitioned into now doing is sort of the next phase of my life, what I really, really deeply love to do. And I realized that I just couldn't do both to the best of my ability. As successful as EGT had been and as much potential as there was in the business, it was just no longer about that. Like I couldn't ignore that. Like this is where my heart is. And so that's what I've been doing since we retired it October 15th, 2020, EGT shut down. And I've been doing this ever since. And it's just like the greatest job in the world. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. And yeah, we can go deeper into the deep game stuff as well if you'd like to, but that's how we got here.
Definitely know so much in the deep game to go through, and we'll do that now. So in case, so for the editor, I'm pretty sure Andre will be doing this one. Andre, just whenever we kind of break that, just be mindful of it. So thank you, Andre, you're the man. Okay, so that's for Andre. In terms of, so I was going to go into a bunch of the rules and all that stuff. So awesome hearing you talk about just, I mean, it sounded kind of like a Marvel movie at the beginning in terms of you traveling the world and meditating for weeks on end. Definitely incredible to think of the passion that you have for it. And I'm so happy to hear about just how much you love doing what you're doing right now with the transition to the deep game. And you mentioned the laws that kind of define it and how they're clear, they're simple, and there's no real debating them. They write their laws for a reason. The first law, the law of presence, I'm curious about that one specifically because I always tell my players, play where your feet are. And it's a cliche. And like you're saying, it's like telling them to kind of just grow taller or be better. It doesn't really work. So how would you go about training someone to really be mindful of where they are and what they're doing in the moment that they're in?
Yeah, so I suppose just to clarify, those 8 laws, the way that in which I set them up, as far as I can see, and this may be corrected later on, but there actually are only 8 laws. Like there's no more, there's no less, but those 8 laws comprise the entire deep game of basketball as I see it. And so the first one is the law of presence, which states that performance increases as thought decreases. So that, just like Newton's law of motion, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, that's true all the time. So as performance increases as thought decreases means, in simple terms, the less you think about playing when you're out there on the floor, the better you're going to play. And that doesn't mean you have no thoughts whatsoever. It just means that your thoughts specifically are subverbal. So the thoughts that you're having don't form sentences in your mind where you're talking to yourself. Your thoughts are like this constant stream of unbroken stream of intuition, where there's no like, you're not speaking to yourself in your head. They're just lightning quick intuitive reactions that are happening on the floor. And I still remember, to illustrate, I'll just share a really quick story that I just thought of. I'm sure you've seen the movie Love and Basketball, right? Like we all did growing up. That was like one of my favorite movies. And there's a scene in that movie that I really liked growing up, where it was filmed from the perspective of the female player, and she was on the floor like sizing up her defender, and she was talking to herself in her mind. And it's a really cool scene from like a filmmaking standpoint, because you're in her perspective and she's like talking to herself like, okay, defender's feet are there, here's where I'm going to pull up. And she hits the shot and she's like, okay, get back on defense, she's going left, okay, steal the ball down to the other end. And it walks you through her entire line of thinking. So I'm thinking to myself, as an 11-year-old basketball player, whatever I was at the time, I'm thinking to myself, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So I go out in the court, and the next game I play, I'm thinking to myself like, okay, he's going left, I need to cut him off, okay, get the ball. And like I'm talking myself through the game, very quickly find out that is not the way to do it. And like the game happens way too fast for that kind of thought. The type of thought that you have, that we all have very often in our everyday life, is just way too slow for the game of basketball. The game of basketball happens intuitively and so rapidly that we can't think through it. Thinking is too slow of a mechanism for basketball. And so the more that we quiet down that way of thinking, the more we quiet our mind and sink into that intuitive flow state of the game, what a lot of players call the zone, which really is just a meditative state. It's like spoken about in this mystical sense in sports sometimes, but the truth is, advanced meditators who live in a state that's way beyond what we call the zone, right? Like this is something you can train actually. And the good news is anybody can train it. There's a really simple methods for doing it that we go into in DeepGame. But the simplest way is just like good old fashioned meditation. Just like you lift weights to get stronger, we meditate to be able to become present during the game and tap into that fluid, intuitive way of playing that we have when we're at our best. And so like simple sitting meditation, I don't have to go, or I won't go too deep into it here, but the basic instruction for like any player can do this 10-20 minutes a day is just to sit in a comfortable posture and pick something to focus on. So classically, that's maybe the breath, and you focus on the feeling sensation of the breath. And I think when you say like, you tell your players to play where their feet are, that's literally like feeling your feet on the ground, feeling your body. The body, anytime a player is like trapped up in their head, the simplest way to get out of your head is just to drop down into the feeling sensation of the body. And so in meditation, we might like feel the breath coming in and going out, feel the belly rising and falling, and inevitably thoughts come up. You get pulled off into thought. You just bring your mind back onto the feeling sensation of the breath. And doing that is sort of like, I use this analogy a lot, but it's like this bicep curl for your brain, where each time your mind wanders off, you pull it back and you get a little stronger, and that focus sharpens a little bit more, and eventually you sink into this sort of open, fluid, intuitive, sensory space. And that is this exact state that players are in when they're in the zone. It's the exact state, and you can achieve that just sitting there on your couch or on the meditation cushion or however you want to do it. You can achieve that on a daily basis, and the more you can do it off the court, the more you can do it on the court. And actually, I would venture to say that it's easier to do it on the court actually than in meditation on your own, because basketball is naturally happening at that pace, and it happens in such a way that it quiets the mind down naturally. And so that's my suggestion for a lot of players, but that's just one of the 8 laws. So the first law of presence, performance increases as thought decreases.
Perfect. So off air, I want to obviously, like there's a lot of them and there's so much to go into with all of them, but I was going to go into the law of extremes, just like, because I thought that kind of kind of transitioned well from this. And then from there, just some of your recent videos I thought were really cool, like the whole thing about Jordan, and because that's kind of off that same point of like being extreme, and like well, in your case, in your story, how he actually isn't that extreme, and how he's actually, and like, so definitely gonna go into that. So I can jump into that now.
I would suggest I would actually suggest doing law number 2. Law of extremes is good as well. Law number 2 is the one that players gravitate to the most, seem to find it most interesting. It's totally like, I can take it wherever you like.
Oh yeah, no, I had it down. I just thought to myself, like, I don't know if I don't want to hit you with like every single law, but I have law number 2. I had law 1, 2, and 3 down, but I was gonna skip 2. But yeah, no, definitely. We'll jump into
those are good ones. Like in my experience, players really like those 3. And law number 7, I would also say, is really important as well. So I mean, I can talk about this stuff nonstop. So wherever you want to take it is totally fine.
Of course, no, definitely. So I'll just jump into law number 2 and take it from there. Coach, it's so interesting when you talk about just law number 1 and just that feelings of the body and really being able to be present. I'm curious about law number 2, the law of reverse effort, and because it sounds so counterintuitive, and it's something that many players at first would resist. I thought I'm supposed to be super focused and super tense at all times. What would you say to that, and what's the importance of this law in terms of how it plays with the rest of them?
Yeah, so law number 2 is the one that a lot of players, like the moment I share it with them, they go, "Oh, that's what's happening." Right. Okay. And so law number 2 is the law of reverse effort. And it states that the harder you try to play well, the more difficult the game becomes. And any serious basketball player, I promise you, has experienced that feeling when you want so badly to play well. You want so badly to impress the people in the stands, the people watching you. You have this goal of scoring 20 points per game, or and so on and so forth. And the act of trying too hard to achieve those goals is actually what's preventing them. And this, again, being that this is a law, it's something that we see not only in basketball, and this goes for actually all of these laws, but it's not only something we see in basketball, but like in all of life. We've all experienced tossing and turning in bed. And the more you like try to get to sleep, you got a big test in the morning and you're like, oh, I need to get good sleep. I need to get a good sleep. If you go to bed thinking that, odds are you are going to be tossing and turning all night long until you finally quiet your mind, forget about it. Maybe you like read a book a little bit and take your mind off of it, and then you drift off to sleep. It's when you stop trying to fall asleep that you actually fall asleep. And you know, we've all had the experience of trying to remember a word that's on the tip of our tongue. And as long as you try to remember it, you can't. But when you go and take a shower and you've forgotten all about it later on, it like pops into your mind. It's the exact same thing. The mind and the body, as human beings, like we think we can control so much. And yet all of the metabolic processes in your body are happening without you controlling them. Your brain works on its own, your blood pumps on its own, your lungs breathe on their own. Like we really are controlling so little of our reality, and yet we think that we can impose our will on it to a really unrealistic degree. And the fact is, like, nature takes care of that stuff. Actually, you do have a lot of ability, and I'm speaking directly to players at the moment, but I have yet to meet a player that didn't have more ability inside of them than they were showing in games. And the thing that prevents that ability from coming out is essentially that they're out of alignment with the 8 laws of the deep game. And specifically, the one that I see most commonly is players just try way too hard. They try way too hard, put too much pressure on themselves. And that's a really popular North American style mentality where we're like, got to go balls to the wall all the time and hustle and grind. And it's just not true. And actually, it's way counterproductive. And I can go, there's so many different examples of this and stories of this, and I can go into detail, but one's coming to mind really quickly, so I'll just share it. There was one day in I believe I was in 9th grade, and so freshman year for people in the States, freshman year AAU basketball, and I had this uncle named Uncle Mike. And throughout my entire childhood, Uncle Mike and I would sit on his back deck. He lived about an hour away from me, so I saw him on holidays and whatnot. But every time I would always look forward to these talks with Uncle Mike on his back deck. And he was a hockey coach, but you know, he understood sports. And so we'd always talk with each other and just talk about, he was a fan of the NBA. And I'd tell him all the work I was putting in, and we'd like get in debates about who the best player in the NBA was. And he was just like this really cool uncle to have. And he had never seen me play. And so freshman year. We're in an AAU tournament. It's in his hometown. He finally is going to come see me play. And I woke up that morning. I never took cold showers back then. I do now, but like back then I never took cold showers. That wasn't even a thing. And I decided I had to take a cold shower just so that I would be that much more ready to like impress Uncle Mike. So I'm like freezing through this cold shower in the morning. We get up early, we go to the gym. I am like so nervous, I'm almost shaking. Like this is my chance to finally prove to him how good I am. And I want to play so well to like impress this man that I'd grown up, like my cool uncle, you know, how I have to play well. And I proceed to have the worst game of the season. I think I scored like 4 points that game. It was the only game I was actually benched in the fourth quarter, like really, really embarrassing. My best friend on the team had 26. And it was just like a really embarrassing moment where the more I wanted to play well, the further away from me that game got. And after the game, I remember my uncle like went up to that friend of mine and was telling him how great he was and how well he played. And he came up to me and just didn't say a word. He was just like, I think he said maybe good game. And then he just changed the subject. It was just such an embarrassing moment. And that was the only game he ever saw me play. And so that happened in the morning, the like 8 a.m. game, I think. And then that evening we had another game. That game was against the best team in our AAU circuit. They had won the provincial title every year for the past 3 or 4 years. And I go on to have the best game of the season. I scored like 20 points at halftime. The coach was yelling at the guy who was guarding me in the hallway, and we could all hear it in the gym because like I was just really outplaying him. And I played so well because all of the pressure was finally off. Uncle Mike didn't come to that game. Like I just hit rock bottom that morning. So I was like, forget it. Like I'm just going to play however I play, and went on to have the best game of the season. And so it was this really critical dichotomy, right, between how I played in the morning when I really wanted to play well, and then how I played in the evening when all the pressure was off. And that law of reverse effort is in action all the time with everybody. Another analogy that comes to mind is trying so hard to make somebody like you that you push them away. Like we've all done that, you know? And so that's really it in a nutshell, is the harder you try to play well, the more difficult the game becomes. And the simplest way for a lot of younger players who are really serious to play much better is to simply stop taking themselves as seriously. And we have techniques for doing that, but I'll hand it over to you so that we don't spend too much time on this one law.
Definitely. So I'll just jump into, I feel law number 3 was a really cool one too. And then for law number 7, because I'm thinking, because I of course, just in the interest of obviously your time and stuff, to go through all 8, I know that would be a lot. How do you think that kind of fit? What do people normally like about that? I'm just curious. Maybe it's so incredible to think about just the idea of that entire law of reverse effort and how that all plays into each other. I'm kind of curious because we, like you said about us here in North America, really thinking about that whole balls to the wall mentality. That's kind of what in The Last Dance, everyone kind of praised Jordan for and saying, oh, wow, like he had this super competitive edge. And one of your most recent videos I thought was super interesting because you talked about how that wasn't always the case. And I'm curious about how that law kind of plays into that with a guy like him, maybe on the surface, or when people see having that insane competitiveness level and finding success. In terms of law number 3, with the law of extremes, what is that? Where does that kind of play into all of that?
Yeah, so I would put the law of extremes and Michael Jordan kind of as 2 separate things. The first one being Michael Jordan. He's a really interesting study because, and this is something one of our players asked a really good question recently, and so I'll approach it from this angle. He basically said like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant were so obsessed with winning. They were so obsessed with being the best. They were so obsessed with various aspects of the game and proving everybody wrong and being like king of the hill. And they asked like, didn't they break some of the 8 laws of the deep game? Like didn't they obviously were in alignment with some of them, but weren't they breaking some of these? And the answer is yeah. Super broke them a lot. And so is every other basketball player in history. Like at the very highest level, the 8 laws of the deep game, the only because each of these go beyond basketball, like the only these are people that I've studied under, the only people that are fully in alignment with all 8 laws are full-blown like enlightened masters. No basketball player in history has ever reached that level, like none of them. And so in a really big way, I was meeting up with with a friend of mine who spent several years playing overseas, played for the Canadian national team, very high level player. And I was talking to him about like where EGT was going and deep game and where my mind was at with focusing entirely on the deep game. And I'll never forget what he said to me, because this is a player who, like, I had never taken him as somebody that would be really into the inner aspect of basketball. And he turned to me and he just said, the mind is the future of basketball. It is the future of basketball. And it really stunned me, actually. I didn't expect him to say it in that way, but he said, like, in professional basketball with all of his coaches and trainers and the people, he played at a really high level. And he said, nobody has explored this territory. Nobody has explored this territory, not in detail. And I can speak from like the perspective of some of the teachers that I've studied under, like the basketball world has not even touched like the true potential of what the mind is capable of, not even come close to touching it. And so it is absolutely true that like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, any player that you could possibly ever mention, they may have a really high basketball IQ. They may have really good skills, but as far as the deep game goes, they're only scratching the surface of the potential that's there. And this is really exciting. It's really exciting because it means that any young player can come in and maybe not have the physical gifts of those players, but they have this like wide open space to explore. And Michael Jordan actually publicly in one of his interviews, I remember this is, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, but Michael Jordan in 1993, he was being interviewed during the playoffs, and this is like his prime MJ, right? And the interviewer asked him, basically, are you satisfied? Are you satisfied with the level you've reached? And do you feel like there's more that you can attain? And Jordan said something really interesting. He said, you know, you'd expect him to be like, no, I'm never satisfied. There's always more. But what he said was, physically, I think I'm at my limit. Actually, physically, I think I'm at my limit. I think this is my peak. Mentally, there's all of this wide open space that I know nothing about. And that was absolutely true. And so these players are like masters of the game of basketball, but in the deep game are really just scratching the surface. And so that really deserves to be said. And I know that it's very popular to talk about how crazy MJ was and how like competitive he was, and Kobe and all of those guys. To a large degree, they succeeded because, number one, they were just so much more naturally gifted than everybody else, but also in spite of mistakes that they made, they didn't do it perfectly. And it's those areas where they didn't quite do it perfectly that offer so much potential for up and coming players. And so that's the first thing I'll say, is that we should not be modeling our mental approach to basketball off of those players, because they didn't do all of it right. They did make mistakes. And the other thing that I think you were referring to as well with that MJ question, this is probably my favorite Michael Jordan story, but essentially as ruthless as he was at times, like, and competitive as he was on the basketball court, if you watch Michael Jordan, like there are it's kind of a running joke, right, that he's cried in public so many times, and there's like those crying memes. But the truth is, like, he was also a really, really, really kind person. A really kind person, and people don't see that. My favorite story of his was when there was a young man who was brought to him before the game, and this is pretty intense, so I apologize in advance, but basically his face had been burned off, so he was very, very disfigured, and his father had burned his face off, so it was a serious trauma and abuse, and very traumatized, very like hurt young man. So he's brought to MJ before the game, and before the game, MJ spends like, I don't know how long it was, probably an hour or something, back in the locker room with him, cracking jokes, talking to him, like just being a buddy, basically. Brings him out onto the floor, onto the Bulls bench, and sits him down there on the bench. Like, he has his own seat, and when there's a pause in the action, he'll come over to him and crack jokes with him and say, like, how'd you like that jump shot, or kind of just be a buddy again. And one of the refs came over to him during this game and said, hey, this is against league rules, like you can't have him on the bench. And MJ just gives him the death stare, and he's like, he's on the bench. And so the ref just all right, say no more, like it's fine. And so this is like just a peek into this other side of Michael Jordan. And it's really important, if you're going to study these people, to have a holistic view of who they actually were, and just understand that they're fallible as well. It's not going to be the best approach to just try to copy their insane competitiveness and drive because they are very unique. They're very naturally gifted, and they did make a lot of mistakes, and they are more complete human beings than The Last Dance would make you believe, right? As much as I love that documentary, and I really do. I'm watching it for the second time right now. But again, like, they're more complete human beings. And in many cases, they're like really, really kind human beings. And that side of things should be emphasized much more so, in my opinion, than the moments where he like punches Steve Kerr in the face. Like, let's talk about him having the kid on the bench who was abused by his father and cracking jokes with him and being like a really good person. That's the story that should be told.
100%. It's so much more important to think of it in that way, because sometimes it just, whether it's the deep game or just the game itself, is so much more than that. It can be so much more than so many people. I'm curious about, if we skip ahead a little bit to law number 7, the law of mastery. When thinking about how the game rewards someone who needs no reward other than the game itself, you can kind of maybe draw some parallels to that with this idea of it being more than that. What are your thoughts on obviously law number 7 and the idea that it's more than that?
This is, so I consider to be this law, the law of mastery, to be the most important law of the deep game for basketball success. And again, that's just speaking in basketball terms. Law number 8, I would say, is the most important overall. For basketball success, though, the law of mastery, the game rewards the player who needs no reward other than the game itself, meaning to play for the love of the game. And this is what players forget. And when they hear Michael Jordan and Kobe talk about like they play to win and they play to be the best, and that's all they care about, you really forget, and it really gets lost sight of, that to play for the love of the game means to play for the sake of the game itself, not what the game will give you. Because if you're playing for what the game will give you, meaning status and rewards and accolades and money or contract, whatever the case may be, if to prove people wrong, and there's so many things that players throw out there as reasons why they play, all of them are completely and totally missing the point. If you love the game unconditionally, unconditional love means love without conditions. And players are placing all these conditions on their love of the game. I will love the game when I'm scoring 20 points per game and I'm, the man on my team. And we forget that, like, that's not a good reason to play. That's actually not a good reason to play. And it's not that it's not a good reason, but it's completely missing the point entirely. It's like saying that the whole purpose of life is to make money. Well, no, that's definitely not true. And yet that's the way that we approach the game of basketball. And I guess to come full circle, I'll loop this into where we left off with that story where when I had torn the cartilage in my hip, I still remember shortly before that incident, when I got injured, my AAU coach said to me one summer, he said, "You play like you have a dark cloud over your head." And it was one of the most like stunning things that anybody had said to me at that point in my career. He said, "You play like you have a dark cloud over your head," meaning like you don't look like you're having fun. And as much as you train hard and like you want to do well and you want to play professionally and all of these things, you play like you have a dark cloud over your head. And it really hit me that he was right, actually. And I remember speaking with the coach that gave me my scholarship, and he had been recruiting me for a lot of years. I had a really close relationship with him at that point in my career. And he had always like it was pretty much set from the time that I was early in my high school days that I was going to go there. But he said to me in one of our like official recruiting meetings, he said, he cracked this joke, and I break into this big smile. And I still remember him saying to me, like, don't do that. Don't smile, because if you start smiling, other coaches are going to start recruiting you and I'm going to lose you. And so I was so gravely serious about the game of basketball that I basically forgot why I even started playing in the first place, because it's a game and it's meant to be enjoyed and loved. And when I hurt my hip and had surgery and was faced with not playing any longer, it was like, my like basketball life flashed before my eyes, so to speak. And I kind of decided then and there that if I continue playing, I'm going to love every moment of it. And that is when my game exploded. And I went from, I believe, 9 points per game to 24 points per game in a single season after having surgery. So I hadn't trained that summer because I was like lying in bed recovering. And so I had the rustiest skill set and the best season of my life. And it was just because all of that love for the game started to pour out. And it was no longer about being the man and proving people wrong and getting scholarships and playing professionally. It was about the moment to moment enjoyment of playing the game. And the analogy that I like to use with this law is the way that most players approach the game to get some end reward. You want to play so that you can get X, status, money, recognition, girls, whatever. You playing in that way is like listening to music on fast forward just to get to the end of the song, because you want to get to the end of the song and complete it. And yet music is meant to be listened to and enjoyed. You are supposed to sing and dance, and you're missing the music of the game. You're missing the song. You're missing the reason for it in the first place. It's a game that's meant to be loved and enjoyed. And that can happen whether you play professionally or whether you play in rec league. And it's great to have these big goals, but the only reason for those big goals is to have bigger experiences of the game that you love, right? If you're doing it for money or recognition or status, like those aren't good reasons to do anything, but there's a whole lot of ways to get money, right? Like money ain't so tricky, especially in today's day and age. It's like there's way easier ways to do it than becoming an NBA player. Like that's a pretty hard one if you're looking to get rich. So that just goes to show, like, law number 7, that one's really near and dear to my heart, because it's like the game really does reward the player who doesn't need reward past the simple act of playing the game itself. That's when the magic of your game really shines through. And we see this in, like, Luka Doncic is my favorite to watch right now, because it's like his whole being is just smiling on the floor when he's playing, and it's so beautiful to watch. So that really, if there's one message that I could get across, and one of the 8 laws that I hope that players follow, it's that one, because there's just no point to doing it otherwise.
Beautifully said, and it's an incredible lesson for us all to think about in terms of, I mean, it obviously goes outside of basketball. Why coach? Why do all these things? And there has to be a reason for it that goes beyond money, fame, whatever it might be. And for most people, I would hope that it is. I'm thinking about law number 8, the law of transcendence, and in terms of how, on a similar vein, it kind of takes, it kind of supersedes the game and goes past that. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that law kind of just caps everything off and making the game mean so much more than what it might look like on the surface?
Yeah, law number 8 is sort of a hint at the bigger picture of DeepGame. And the bigger picture is the simple fact that these 8 laws, they're wrapped in basketball. Like I've put this basketball wrapper around them, but the truth is they're fundamental laws of the mind and of life. And so we could state them in different words and apply them to life as a whole very, very easily. And the 8th one is that basketball is not life, it is a teacher of life. And this is one that, like, most commonly players don't really get it until they're older, and much older in a lot of cases. And I remember an interview with Kobe later on in his career, and he said, I would have these conversations with MJ and with Magic and, like, older greats in the game, and they would always say things to me like, basketball just taught me so much about life. It was like my greatest teacher about life, and there's so many lessons about life that I learned in the game. And Kobe was like, when I was younger, I totally didn't get that. I was like, what are these guys talking about? And this is even when he first came into the league and started talking to them. And he said it wasn't until much later that I really started to get it. Oh yeah, like, this isn't all of life. And ball is life has become such a popular term. It sounds cool to say, and yet it's completely and totally false. It's completely and totally false. And the lessons from basketball so often that we're taught are, in basketball culture anyhow, are the wrong lessons. That the whole, like, hustle and grind and win at all costs and punch your teammates in the face when they, like, argue with you in practice or whatever it is, like, those sorts of lessons are just the wrong ones. This is more toxic North American mentality. It's simplistic thinking. It's like, so often it almost seems like the image that comes to mind is like the audience at a Tony Robbins event, where they're, like, screaming and jumping up and down, and they're so excited in the crowd, like, oh yeah, hustle, grind, and yet they go home and, like, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. And that's really what it's about. And so the 8 laws of the deep game are a way in which to approach life as a whole. And when that is done, and that's the way that they're applied, it really transforms every aspect of life. And, like, I've taken these 8 laws into my business life, and they've helped me so much more in the business world than they ever did in basketball. And we have players who are, like, in their first relationships now, and they've met this, like, girl that they're in love with, or one player in particular, like, who I've formed a close friendship with over the years. He started in 6th grade, and now he's an adult. It's crazy to see. He's an adult. He's about to graduate from college, became a very good player, and he overcame depression, like clinical, real like cellular level depression. And it's just so beautiful to see, like, there's something bigger going on here. There's something much bigger going on here. And it's not about ball is life or like making basketball your life. The players who make basketball their life most often, to me, that I see, are the players who struggle the most. And it's the players who have stuff going on outside of basketball that don't have so much pressure on them to succeed, when you can still like chill with your buddies, whether you win or lose, or whether you play well or not. Those are the players who approach the game with that free effortlessness that is the signature of like the greatest players of all time. They simply have more going on in their life than just basketball. So there's a lot we could say about that, like really a lot. It's very deep, but that's what I'll say for now, is that like basketball is not life. It is a teacher of life.
So important. And of course, for listeners, if you want to hear the full story about law number 8 or any of the laws we covered through, or just all of the contents on DeepGame, make sure to check out the YouTube channel. And now that recently we started a podcast. I'm curious as to starting the podcast, we're kind of expanding the DeepGame as and making all this content. What's kind of next? And then also, where should listeners be directed to make sure they're keeping up with everything that you're doing?
Yeah, so the most important thing, sort of the gateway for all of DeepGame, is the masterclass. And so there's a 1 hour free, we call it a masterclass. It's basically a like video presentation, and I go into all 8 laws in detail. There's techniques, and there's like a handout that you follow. And this is like my class, intro to DeepGame class that I teach. And we've had many thousands of players take that now. It really, I don't want to sound like I'm tooting my own horn here, but like it's very valuable. If you're an up and coming basketball player, it can really change a lot and help a lot. So the best place to see that is deepgame.com. You can take that class. And as far as what's coming next, honestly, like I'm kind of doing what I want to do. It's so funny to say, I haven't set a goal in like a year. And sometimes I think to myself, like, should I be doing more? Like, is there, but no, I'm doing exactly what I want to do. There's the goals seem like beside the point now. It's just, I show up every day, I give a talk, on camera, and share it with our players and teach to the best of my ability. And hopefully the teaching gets better over time. And so what's next is basically, I'll just continue developing my skills as a teacher and hopefully sharing some of the more advanced material that I really want to share. But in the early days of DeepGame, I think that's just a little too soon probably, but that's really where my heart is teaching the advanced stuff. And so there will be, the DeepGame ecosystem is a simple one. Unlike EGT, we had like, I think 19 different programs and a membership and all these things. Right now, it's just the DeepGame Masterclass at deepgame.com, which is free. We have a complete like 8-week DeepGame program where we train players in these 8 laws. That's a paid course. And then there will be a DeepGame Mastery program coming out where I go beyond basketball and teach into every aspect of life, and even some of the really advanced esoteric stuff that I study personally. That's where I'll be teaching that. And so that'll be coming whenever it comes. Not sure. We'll see. Whenever it's ready, it'll be out. And that's pretty much it, man.
It's super cool. And just thinking about how much more there is to go with this. It's crazy how we always talk about how guys are doing, high schoolers are doing Vince Carter's 2000 slam dunk contest dunks in high school layup lines. But to think about how much more they have to do with it. I mean, obviously physically they've reached that level,
Yeah.
But now there's also that whole mental side of the game that they haven't even scratched the surface of, like we said. So really can't wait to see that. And Coach, thank you so much for joining the show, because honestly, just whether it's the laws, whether it's what you're doing, I mean, really everything that you're up to is just so interesting. And really there's so many people that really need to know about all this mental stuff, because it doesn't get talked about nearly half as much, not even close, as the surface game. And it's such a vital part. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. It's funny when you said that Vince Carter slam dunk thing, and I think back to how much dunking has evolved. And what we really see, actually, if you look closely, like there's a lot of progress, and also there's diminishing returns. As far as, and players have improved a lot, don't get me wrong, but it's sort of like the Michael Jordan interview where he said, I think I'm kind of at my limit, actually, with the physical side of things. That is true for a lot of players when they become more advanced. It's like, oh yeah, there's only so many shots you can make, and there's so many, your handles can only get so sharp. At a certain point, there are diminishing returns. And what I've found, the deeper I go into what we call the deep game, like that, the further I take that, the more I realize, no, the mind is actually infinite. It's infinite. And I mean that literally. By its very nature, it is infinite. The entire universe is like contained within the human mind. That's a wild thing to think about. And so not only is there no diminishing returns, but it's exponential. And that's exciting to me. And I think that's why I kind of fizzled out on the skill and performance side of things, which I was so interested in early on in my career. It was like, oh yeah, this isn't so complicated. Like it's relatively easy to figure out, and the mind is just got so much more to it, and the potential for progress is just beyond anything that we could possibly imagine. So I'm really excited, and I'm excited to continue learning. I'm learning at the same time as I'm teaching this stuff, which really, my daily life right now is just so fun because that's all I do is learn and then teach it. So yeah, thank you for having me on. I'm happy I could share.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.